Make sure to follow us on Instagram at Whistlethrowers. It's a great way to interact with our show. Our DMs are always open for questions, topic discussions, and more. You will be able to find our new episodes and other announcements there.
I don't think the Knicks have a chance.
Thanks for tuning back to the Whistlethrowers podcast. This is Jack Mubarak, joined by
Jack Slaymaker
and Aiden Jakinski.
So we got a full slate of the NBA playoffs to cover. Firstly, we're going to talk about who's been the best performer so far of the playoffs. And there's a couple names that we could throw in there. Nikola Jokic, Jimmy Butler, Devin Booker, to name a few, Joel Embiid. Who do you think takes the cake so far?
To me, it's really down to Jokic and Butler thus far. I feel like in terms of just individual performances, and then also when you factor in team success, the Heat and Nuggets both have two of the better records this playoffs. Just the sheer dominance that they both have showed. I actually give the nod to Jokic. I actually have always liked Jokic. It's just that sometimes you have to bring him down to push your Embiid MVP case. So I feel like we don't give Jokic that much credit on this podcast, at least, because, I mean, you and me are kind of in that boat, Jack. Aiden has given him a lot of credit, but I feel like we don't give him enough credit as he maybe deserves. I think he's been the best player this playoffs. Those two performances, games 3 and 4 in Phoenix, that's what you want to see out of your MVP caliber player. And although they didn't win those games, he did everything he could to keep them in the game and keep them close and gave them a chance to win. And I think it was in game 3, he had 2 bad plays in the end of the game in the fourth, but he still ended up having like 53 points and almost 20 rebounds. That's just incredible. Like, he deserves everything this playoffs.
Yeah, he's been amazing so far, and I feel like I never take Jokic's side on the show.
Yeah, that's kind of what I mean.
I'm not going to take it once again. I will give it to Jimmy Butler, and while they're not supposed to beat at this point, like they should have lost in the first round, but now they're an 8 seed, then they're going to go to the Eastern Conference Finals if all goes well, because they're up 3-1 on the Knicks. But if you look at it, for me, it's Jokic has been a 2-time MVP, and he's kind of expected to lead the first seed into the Western Conference Finals, and he's doing a great job so far. But if you look, the last game they played, Game 5, this was the third game that he has led the team in scoring. He's gotten a lot of help from guys like Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., and they have a really elite bench. So I will give it to Jimmy Butler just because he is single-handedly willing this 8th seed to an Eastern Conference Finals, and they're doing it without Tyler Hero, who is like responsible for so much of their offensive production. Right. He has not been there since like the early games of round 1.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I was going to give it to Jimmy Butler too, but for the sake of argument, I'm going to throw another name out there. To me, the best player, solely because of the position that he put this team in, has been James Harden. Because without him, the Sixers would not be controlling the series the way they are right now. Without him beating Game 1, Harden put up 45 points, which is just ridiculous. And then sort of fell off in Games 2 and 3. Game 4, 42 points, and that was one where Embiid played well, but not as well as you would expect him to. And then in the game where Embiid took over, he still almost got a triple-double.
Yeah.
Harden has basically been the sole reason why the Sixers are at the point where they are against the Celtics. And even in the first round when Embiid wasn't there, he was still doing everything. He was that leader when Embiid wasn't there. And his stats aren't off the board the same way they are with Jimmy, who I would say is much more up there than Jokic. And I have defended Jokic more than both of you guys. The Heat have only lost 3 playoff games this whole series, this whole time in the postseason. It was the loss to the Hawks where Butler only scored 21. The loss to the Bucks was 25. And then the loss to the Knicks, he didn't even play. So I agree. I don't think that the Heat would be there at all. But I think that at this point, Harden is showing why the Sixers had so much faith in trading for him. And it's paid off dividends for them dramatically to where they are this season.
Yeah, I was going to bring him up if you didn't, so I'm glad you did. And trust me, I wanted to say his name very badly as best performer of this playoffs. I love the argument for it. The only reason I didn't was because his first round was just a little shaky. And it seems like Butler and Jokic, I feel like have been more consistent throughout both rounds.
I feel like if you bring Harden up, you have to bring Tatum up too, because like they had like a big really set of like good games, but like they've both been consistent. You
definitely give the nod to Harden over Tatum because the thing is Harden, like Tatum was having good performances, but did you ever feel like Jason Tatum was taking over the game? You never really felt that way. Where Harden, his 45-point performance in Game 1, his 42 in Game 4, and then Aiden even said it, He almost had a triple-double in Game 5, only 17 points, but it still felt like he was controlling the game. And that's kind of where I like Aiden's argument, because James Harden, first off, I actually think the Sixers have the best record this playoffs. Am I right on that? Because Nuggets lost one in round one, and they've lost two, and then Heat lost in round one. They've lost.
The Heat have lost 3 technically, because they also lost an opening play-in game with the Hawks.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So,
yeah.
The Sixers do have the best record in the postseason.
Yeah. So Harden has really been the main force behind this playoffs' best team. I mean, if he has another performance like he has the last 2 games in a Game 6 that clinches them the spot, I mean, it's going to cement Harden's legacy, because he'll be making a deep playoff run with a team that, I mean, this Sixers team, let's face it, it isn't a super team. Like, they have a great top duo. Like, yeah, that makes them a really good team, but, like, would you even consider them a super team? There's no way. There's no way you consider this Sixers team a super team just because they haven't beaten Harden. Like,
I wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that this says a lot about Harden's legacy if he continues to push the Sixers deeper and deeper into this postseason. Because, I mean, let's face it, like, Durant hasn't done that since leaving Golden State.
Yeah, no, he's been not that good. And I mean, the thing is, for Durant in this postseason, he has put up very, very good numbers. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason why the Suns are able to come back. And again, I said that the Nuggets were going to sweep when Paul got hurt. The difference from that point on is that Cameron Payne's actually pushed the offense a lot faster than I thought he was going to.
Didn't I say that he could have had resurgence this series? Yeah. I did say it.
Yeah, but like, okay, a resurgence, not really. It's just changed how the offense is run. But it's not like that Cameron Payne is now all of a sudden this elite scorer or something.
Yeah.
Like, that's just not the case. They just run a different style, which arguably they should have been doing to begin with. So it just took Chris Paul out of the equation for them to realize that. But my point is that when it comes to Kevin Durant, he puts up great numbers. Him and Booker both do, but there's no one else behind them. And that's the thing, is that Harden is putting up great scoring numbers when he has to in certain games, but he knows when to take a step back. He knew to let Embiid take over the game early in the second half to put the game away in Game 5 last night. He knew to let Maxey get the ball, to let Harris do his thing. Like, he is totally fine at this point in his career to let other people take over, and the Sixers are set up to do that. Other teams are not really meant to do that other than the Nuggets and the Lakers. And to me, that's about it.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'm just going to pose a question right now. So we got 2 games. One's going on right now. Miami Heat versus New York Knicks. Obviously, the Knicks are down 3-1. And later tonight, we got Lakers versus Warriors. The Warriors are down 3-1. Which team is more likely to come back?
Between Knicks and Warriors, 100% Warriors. 100%. I don't think that the Knicks have a chance.
Yeah, I'm not even going to say 100%. It's 1,000% chance Golden State. The Knicks are done. Even if they somehow miraculously win this game, which I don't see happening. Yeah, they're up by 3 at halftime, but that doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah.
I just don't see a way the Knicks can come back. I think that the Heat with Jimmy Butler are pretty much unstoppable unless you're able to set up a good game plan. And I just don't think the Knicks have the right pieces to do that.
Yeah, agreed. And Miami, you can just tell they're in a different class than New York. New York, I feel like they're building a good foundation actually there. They just need something. They need one more star because Randall is not going to cut it. I don't know if you guys were seeing those clips from Game 4 in Miami, but Randall like turning the ball over and then walking back on defense.
Yeah, he had 6 turnovers that game.
Yeah, you can't have that out of your star, out of one of your top options.
I think they're going to trade him after the season.
Yeah, I think so too because I mean, that's just inexcusable, and that can, like, what example are you setting for the rest of your team? Yeah, they just need something else, because Brunson is a really good piece.
That was a great trade that the Knicks made to get him. The biggest issue I have with the Knicks is they don't have a bench, and this has been the theme of the NBA playoffs for a while now, is you have to have a deep team to make a deep run. Mm-hmm. The Knicks don't really have that, and they refuse to play players. And part of that is because that's what Thibodeau has been known to do, is only play your top 5 guys until you wear them out and then not go to your bench when you need to. And, I mean, Obi Toppin has 2 points right now off the bench, and that's the only points that the Knicks have scored from their bench. So that's just not sustainable considering what the Heat have done and have such a deep roster. And when you lose a guy like Tyler Hero, that's supposed to be a huge factor. The Heat at that point should have been sort of ruled out as a favorite to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals. And they're so deep that they're having the control over a higher seed when they're the 8th seed. That just shows that the way the Heat are set up, and it should be a model for how other teams establish their rosters as well.
Yeah, agreed. And, like, that's just a tip of the cap to guys like Spoelstra and Pat Riley over there. Like, they have a great, great culture in Miami, and they've had a great culture since, like, 2006.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on that last Lakers games, Game 4.
Yeah.
Like, that was a fourth quarter collapse from the Golden State Warriors, and we saw it from, like, their staples of the franchise.
Yep.
Like, Curry grabbing that loose ball and then throwing it out of bounds behind him. Draymond Green throwing the ball straight to the Lakers defender. Like, I don't know what it is. It seems like there's turmoil in the locker room this year, especially with Jordan Poole again. Like, I think they kind of have a problem on their hands because they expected him to, like, be a guy that they could play in those minutes. And, like, he was on the bench, obviously. And then, like, you see the veterans of that team not take care of business, and you wonder maybe should they have had a shooter in the clutch moment, even though he was 0 for 4 that game. Like,
yeah, I mean, he only got like 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
He did not play that much. And yeah, I definitely agree with you. And it's very similar to what we're talking about in the Heat-Knicks series. What Aiden was bringing up is the Heat are just deeper than the Knicks. The Lakers are just deeper than the Warriors. It showed in that fourth quarter in Game 4 when Lonnie Walker dropped 15 in the fourth quarter. All 15 of his points all came in the fourth quarter. And the Warriors just didn't have anyone outside of Curry that could step up and help him when his shot was off that night. Like, I believe he was 3 for 14 from 3. His shot's just off. That's going to happen sometimes. Obviously, you don't expect that from Curry. He doesn't expect that from himself. It probably won't happen again. It's going to happen sometimes here and there, and you needed someone outside of him to step up, and no one can. I mean, let's face it, like, Klay is not someone that you just hand the ball to him and say, go isolate. Like, that's just not the type of player he is. Draymond, I think one of the scarier things to imagine for the Warriors is Draymond in isolation. They don't want that at all. You know, when you lack that depth, that's just going to kill you when you get to points like here, when you have to play a Lakers team that, they're a low seed, but they got really good players, like, top to bottom. Their entire rotation is good.
What I don't understand about this series is the one game that the Warriors played really well scoring at the center position, and the one game, it was the same game where Anthony Davis got totally shut down, was when JaMychal Green started. Green put up 15 points. Davis was only held to 11, and the Warriors won by 27. And Davis hasn't started since. That to me is incomprehensible, and it makes no sense from a coach of Steve Kerr who should be able to see that matchup worked really well for them, and to just go away from it in every game after that. Like, that to me is a really bad sign for the Warriors.
Yeah, and I guess we can move on to the Sixers-Celtics series. So obviously Game 5 was last night. This was recorded on May 10th. So the Sixers really did surprise everyone. They went into the TD Garden and they handled business the whole way through.
Yeah.
Everyone was expecting a comeback from the Celtics like there was in Game 4, but it never showed up. And the whole tide of the series changed. And obviously I'm not sold on the Sixers winning this yet, especially if they lose Game 6 in Philly. Then I think it's just going to be a bloodbath. They definitely have a chance to make it to the Eastern Conference semifinals for the first time since 2001.
Well, Eastern Conference Finals, not semifinals.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, but
I'll just cut that out.
We touched on it earlier. I mean, the impact that James Harden has been having, it's insane to see. I don't think I've seen a Sixers team play this well in the playoffs in our lifetime. You know, we just missed the cut for that 2001 playoff run. So I think we can confidently say this is the best Sixers team we've seen in the playoff. It's all orchestrated by James Harden right now. I mean, obviously Embiid is your MVP, but what James Harden is doing it's different. I mean, we've brought in a lot of players to try and get this to work with Embiid, and none of them have had the amount of success that we're seeing James Harden have. I mean, he's just being a magician in this playoffs, and he's bringing out a lot from other guys. Like we saw 30 points from Maxey last night. Harris added 16 points. He seems to be way more comfortable in the playoffs now than he did in the regular season. I mean, let's face it, Glenn Rivers, he's been having a wonderful playoffs, and he had a wonderful end to the regular season too. He's looked like a different coach, flat out. I mean, this team looks different than it has in the past with Glenn Rivers. And it's crazy how a wake-up call, Game 6 last year against Miami, when the fans are leaving early, you got spanked on your home court, facing elimination. That's not what you want to happen. And it was such a wake-up call, and it's crazy to see how much everyone was so driven by that. Because we haven't seen that from Sixers teams.
It's definitely, I still will call him Doc Rivers till the end of time, but Rivers has definitely done a great job coaching. On the other side, Joe Mazzulla has been horrible as a coach. Couple of examples. First of all, basically every time that Tatum or Smart just don't get going, there's no game plan switched up. Basically, it just seems like we're going to let both of them shoot until they get out of their funk, and eventually they do, but at that point it's too late. Like, that's twice now where the Celtics were down really early. The first time they almost came back and won, and then lost because of two terrible coaching decisions where they had timeouts, both in regulation and in overtime, where they could have called a timeout, drawn up a play, and instead they go to run out the clock and don't score either time. So they should have won Game 4 easily if they had any competent coaching at all. And then in last night's game, it felt off, and it felt like that he didn't really have a game plan. And when he was asked afterwards, his responses were just so bland. And he was asked whether or not that they had like a motivation, like why did they came out looking like it's a January game? And basically his response was, we had the intent to come out firing. What does that even mean? If you don't come out firing, you don't come out firing. Even if you have like an intent, if you look lazy, then you're just lazy and you just aren't motivated. And I think part of it is that the Celtics were super overconfident. I think that they didn't think that not having Udoka as their coach would come back to bite them, and it has. And that's because they didn't really look in the regular season to find a better interim coach. Because I think for the Celtics, you can have a guy like Mazzulla coach in the regular season and be totally fine with that talent. But the moment you need someone to actually coach, he's not that guy.
I think he can be a coach later on. It's just a lot to ask a first-year coach to actually, game plan for a playoff game. And I get the roster's very talented, but it still requires skill at the coaching position. Like we see it with Steve Nash. He had one of the greatest teams ever, and he couldn't do anything with it. He had 3 of the best scorers of all time, and there's no game plan. There was a lot of egos and other stuff, but you really need someone that knows what he's doing at the coaching position if you want to win a championship.
Right. Yeah, I think people underrate the value of a coach on an NBA team. I'm not saying, it's not the hardest job in terms of, all sports. I don't think the NBA coaching job is the hardest. I mean, it's an incredibly difficult thing to do, bring a tight-knit group of 12 guys together. It's obviously the smallest roster size that you can think of in sports, and it's just tough to really get a lot of motivation out of guys. And you're seeing with the Sixers right now, Glenn Rivers is doing that at a very high level. Like you just said, you brought up a lot of the times egos get in the way of teams. And you can tell with this team, there's not a single ego. They're all bought in on one common goal, and they all see each other as equal, no matter who it is. So that's something you haven't seen in the past, but it is something you see with a lot of great championship cultures in all sports.
I think part of the issue for both the Knicks and Celtics is the moment that the Bucks were eliminated and they realized they were going to be the higher seeds in their playoff series, they immediately got way too overconfident. So they said, okay, now we have a legitimate shot to run to a championship, completely overlooked the opponent that they had in that next series, which is the one that's currently happening. And it's just shown. It really has. And I think that's part of the issue with the Celtics especially, is that they were really, really cocky coming into this series. Considering that they were the 2 seed and now the favorite, besides the Heat probably, and most people weren't banking on the Heat to do what they've done, even though they beat the Bucks. So I think that when the Celtics just ran through the Hawks like that, everyone just assumed that they would easily get past the Sixers, especially with Embiid not playing Game 1. And I don't think the game played well for James Harden. Yeah. I really don't think that they did at all. I think that their original plan is to set up for Embiid stuff with a double team, and they haven't game planned for Harden. especially, but they also didn't game plan for Maxi's speed. They didn't game plan for Harris to come out the way that he's had in this series.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just been really surprising that they've left Al Horford on Embiid. Like, that's another really bad coaching decision, is that Embiid, when he finally realized they had that mismatch and they weren't putting in Robert Williams, that he could just go after Horford one-on-one and they're not bringing that double team. Like, it's just so frustrating. So even though I want the Sixers to win, it's frustrating as a basketball fan to watch what the Celtics are doing and realize that they're not going to change their game plan at all.
They got to figure something out if they want to have a chance in this series and push it to 7, but it's not looking good at this point. We can talk about the Suns-Nuggets series. I think it's really interesting because a lot of people are kind of writing this off as the Nuggets are going to sweep them, and obviously they have the advantage of 3-2, but everyone thought it was going to be a 4-game sweep or a 5-game gentleman sweep, and that just hasn't been the case up to this point.
Mm-hmm.
Who's had the biggest impact on the Suns to step up?
That's a tough one. I mean, Devin Booker's been doing all he can. I think he needs Kevin Durant more. I think Kevin Durant is putting up good numbers, but like I was kind of saying with Tatum, it's he's not having the impact that a dominant performance does. And I think that Booker needs that kind of help from him because, dude, he's been grinding. And even you saw it in the first round, too. He was willing them to victories, dropping over 35 for, a bunch of games. And when the Suns are struggling, Booker is the one guy hitting shots, keeping them in the game. So I think Booker needs Durant right now.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Here's a stat that's really, really surprising. Durant's three-point percentage right now in the playoffs overall, 33%. Booker's is 50%. When you look at field goals, Durant's a little bit under 50%, and Booker's at 60%. So it's pretty shocking when you look at it from that perspective. Yeah. It really looks like that Booker is almost single-handedly leading the Suns. And, I mean, again, not really because Durant is there, but it sort of feels like that Durant's just following Booker's lead, and that's not what I think the Suns are expecting when they traded for him. I also want to point out that this would have been a gentleman's sweep if Landry Shamet hadn't scored 19 points in game 2. Yeah. Or, sorry, game 3. That will never happen again. So, and in the other game that they won, Booker scored 46, I think it was, and Durant still scored less than 40. So, basically, it took one fluke game from a guy off the bench that will not do that again in the series, and one of the most just brutally fought games by Booker and sort of by Durant to get them the other win. And then you saw in game 5 when both of those guys were playing all right, but not to the level that they could, and then Jokic played to his best level, there's no way that the Suns could beat them. So to me, that sort of shows where the series has gone, is that it takes heroic efforts by Booker and Durant and someone else to miraculously step up to just compete in close games with the Nuggets. And when the Nuggets are on, they're just blowing out the Suns.
Right, yeah. I feel the same way. The Suns definitely have 2 of the top 3 players in that series. You just don't feel like they have a shot against Denver, and it just speaks to the depth. They lack so much depth. And you're right, you're just not going to get 15 plus consistently out of Shamet. So you're going to need those heroic performances by Durant and Booker because the Nuggets are, I still don't think the Nuggets are better than Boston or Philly. They've looked really good this playoffs, though. They look deep. They look deep enough to be a championship team for sure. So you're just not going to, Durant and Booker can't do it on their own. That's just the bottom line.
Yeah, I do think they have a chance of pushing it to 7, but I still think that the Nuggets will get through because they are relying too much on 2 guys.
Yeah.
One, especially Devin Booker, it's unreal that he's having those numbers, and I don't think you could stretch that across multiple series, but they have zero help on the bench, and when it does, it's so out of left field, and I think the Nuggets are just built too well to just go down by luck to a team that just doesn't have it this year.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
Kind of hit on all the points with the NBA. We can move into the MLB.
Yeah, so the biggest surprise has been that the Cardinals are off to one of their worst starts ever in franchise history, and it's been a couple of things. I think that losing some of your veterans, especially Yadier Molina was a huge loss for them. Yeah. I think that wasn't going – like, everyone knew that was going to be a big factor when it came to the defense and all that stuff, but especially from the leadership perspective, that's been a huge loss. Their defense hasn't looked that good. And honestly, outside of, like, a few guys like DeJean and Yepez batting over 300, Goldschmidt's batting over 300, which is, like, just expected from him.
Yeah.
Some of these other guys just are really struggling, especially Arenado, batting only 236, which, his defense is still all right. But again, the Cardinals defense as a whole is really bad. So just having one defender and him not hitting well, that's going to impact your team. So I think it's just a lot of issues for the Cardinals. Getting Jordan Montgomery last year for the Yankees was supposed to be this blockbuster trade for them. He hasn't pitched well. So there's just a lot of bad things happening for the Cardinals right now.
Yeah, and they expected more out of Michaelis this year. He hasn't really thrown that well. They lost Quintana. I feel like they've had a good year, too, from the rookie Walker. Like, I think he's had a pretty good year. And normally when a rookie is playing well like that, you'd expect their team to have a little more success. I mean, they just lack so much in pitching, I feel like. If I'm not wrong, I think they have their staff ERA is second worst in the National League. I think only to the Phillies. I think the Phillies actually have the worst pitching staff ERA, or maybe it was starting rotation ERA. But it doesn't really matter. Whatever it is, most pitching metrics and stats, the Cardinals are down to the bottom in all of them. And I mean, I'm not trying to say that their hitting is so good and their pitching is ruining their season. Like, their hitting hasn't been great either. But I feel like if they had just gotten a little more out of their pitching, maybe the record would be a little bit different. And we are seeing in the NL Central too, like, some of those teams are coming back down to life a little bit. Like, the Pirates have struggled a little bit recently and they're coming back down to the pack. The NL Central still feels open. Like, it still feels like no one's taking it right now and it's up for grabs. I know, I mean, listen, the Cardinals have put themselves in a tremendous hole. I don't think it's insurmountable at the same time. Like, I do think they can get out of it, but a lot is going to have to change. Like, let's just put it this way. When the Phillies were 22-29 and fired Girardi on June 1st, who thought they were going to go and win the NL pennant, beating the Braves and the Padres? Like, who would have thought that, you know? So they can do it, but again, like, Marmol's probably going to have to go. That's, like, you're probably going to have to make big shakeups.
But the other thing, too, about the Cardinals and this division as a whole, one of the teams, and this is a team that I said right before the season started that I would expect to make the playoffs, the Cubs, are 17-19, but they have a lot of guys that are playing really, really well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Bellinger's had a total resurgence.
Yeah, he's had a really good bounce back.
Yeah, Yan Gomes and Ian Happ are both batting a little bit under 300.
Yep.
So this is a team that I think once they put it all together, because they are a lot of new guys that are playing together, but to me, they feel more ready to make that jump than the Cardinals do.
Agreed.
And they're beating the Cardinals right now, too, in like a really big series at this point in the season. They lost the first two games. So if they can take this one from the Cardinals, that would be huge. So they could get closer to 500 and just still be taking the Cardinals standings at this point. I will say that it is good for the Cardinals that they got Adam Wainwright back. Mm-hmm. But Adam Wainwright is pushing, like, he's at the end. Like, he already announced this is his last year. So I don't know how much you can expect out of him to really make the staff more stable. And the other thing, too, is he was already hurt once. There's no reason why he couldn't get hurt again.
Exactly.
So I think for that perspective, it is an issue for the Cardinals that these other teams, although they're slipping a little bit, look, the Brewers, to me, haven't gotten off to the best start either, but they're 20-17. I can see them still winning the division. Mm-hmm. They're probably favorites still, too. Yeah. And the Reds have been playing a lot better than most people thought they were going to as well. So although it's an open division, it's a competitive one.
Yeah.
And to me, the Cardinals just put themselves way too much in an early hole, and I don't see enough people that can step up to really right the ship for them.
Yeah, agreed. And I think I agree with you about Chicago. I do expect them to make the playoffs. I think I like them to win that division. Like, they are 17-19, like you said, but I believe Pittsburgh has 21 wins at the top right now, so they're not far off at all. It's right there for them. And 17-19 is not a terrible start. I mean, it's not necessarily ideal, but it's nothing to be worried about. it's nothing to panic about. I mean, the Cardinals are in full panic, but I feel like the Cubs are in a good spot. And like you said, they have guys who are playing well. And as the weather gets warmer, you can start to rack up a little bit, some more wins, and hopefully your pitching staff gets going. And the summer can bode well for a lot of teams like the Cubs.
Yeah, I also want to point out for the Pirates, they've lost the last 9 out of 10.
Yeah.
So they are looking like what we expected the Pirates to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, like I said, it was very exciting for them to get off to the start that they did. It shows that they have a lot of young guys to be excited about. But without O'Neal Cruz, this team doesn't really have that bona fide young star that you really want. And they still have a while to go in their rebuild. And again, this is a very competitive division too.
Yeah.
So, and the teams that they lost to, they got swept by the Rays, they got swept by the Blue Jays, and lost 2 out of 3 to the Rockies. And the Rockies aren't great either, but they've had a couple of these series where they sort of win games and win series that you're not expecting them to. Mm-hmm. So I just think that the Pirates are finally facing teams that are harder, and it's showing that they don't have that necessarily the experience or the talent to be able to beat them. And for those reasons, I think the Cubs that have the talent, have the experience, they just need to sort of all play together and gel. Once that happens, and like you said, it's still early. Once you get into June, July, August in Chicago and the ball starts flying out, you're going to see some of these guys have much better numbers. And I think that's going to show by August what this Cubs team actually is.
Yeah.
We can move into the NFL really quickly. The schedules have been released.
Well, not the full ones, yeah.
Yeah, not the full ones, but like the matchups have been released.
Yeah.
As of right now, the Eagles do have the hardest schedule, and it does make sense because they're the defending NFC champs. But there were a lot of other teams that maybe should have had a harder schedule but didn't. Like, for example, the Chiefs, like their schedule's pretty... middle of the pack.
Here's the thing. So, like, that stuff is, like, based off of last year's records for a lot of teams. So, like, for the Chiefs, getting 4 games with the Raiders and Broncos, who had pretty poor records last year, like, that kind of helps in the department of strength of schedule. And then you look at the Eagles, like, they have the Cowboys and Giants in their division. That's definitely why their strength of schedule is, like, up towards the top. And if you look at that list too, the Eagles are 1, and then the Cowboys and Giants are literally like 3 and 4.
Yeah, and the Commanders are 8.
Yeah,
because they play each other.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised the Commanders aren't higher because they have to play Eagles, Dallas, and New York.
Well, the only reason why it's not as hard is because they finished last, so they'll be playing the last place teams in the South, North, and West.
Yeah,
so that makes it a little bit easier for them. Although I still don't have a lot of faith in them. Improving that much more just because of how good the other 3 teams are ahead. I am surprised to see San Francisco at 15. That surprises me a little bit. Mm-hmm. I know that the West wasn't great last year.
Yeah, I guess those records kind of skew it.
It does, but also you got to play Seattle twice still. And I mean, Seattle's basically tied 12th, but they're like 14th and 15th next to San Francisco. So definitely those last place teams are holding them back. So something that's always interested me about the NFL is certain teams, and the Eagles had this happen to them last year where they didn't finish first and then had to play all the first place teams, but they finished 3rd, 4th, and were able to retool the roster to be able to go up to first in their divisions. So do you see any teams that didn't finish first last year that will be playing second place teams, third place teams, fourth place teams that you can see make the playoffs because their schedule is so easy?
Oh, that's a good one. I mean, I don't know where the Lions rank in strength of schedule. Do any of you? I'm not sure, but
it wasn't in the top half.
Yeah, I could definitely see Detroit benefiting from that because that's sort of similar to what the Eagles did this year. Like, we all know how great the Eagles team was, but let's be real. I mean, they benefited from playing some of the worst teams and beating up on them like they should. So I could see Detroit getting, not 14 wins, but I could see them racking up a couple wins where they're beating up on teams that are a little worse than them, especially looking in their division. Like the Bears and Packers aren't necessarily looking to be juggernauts at all this year. So I could see Detroit being that kind of team that racks up some wins against some bad teams, gets in the playoffs.
Yeah, so the Lions are 20th, so I could definitely see them being that team. The Jaguars are 23rd. I think that they'll make it back again.
Agreed.
Because I think the issue for the AFC is that the 1 seed will pretty much always either go to the Chiefs or Bengals at this point until someone can prove otherwise. maybe the Bills, but I think that the Bills are getting a little bit worse. And I just see that the Bengals and Chiefs are the two dominant teams. But the Jaguars play in a really weak division. They've looked much better last year than any other time that I can remember outside their AFC championship run. So I think that they could benefit from that. Let me see any other teams. I like the Lions because I don't think that the Bears and Vikings are going to be that much better. I think the Vikings will regress a lot, and the Packers, we just don't know what Jordan Love is.
Yeah.
Besides that, okay, here's one, and I just don't – the hardest schedule for any NFC South team goes to, I want to say it's which team is it? I'm trying to look. It's the Buccaneers.
Yeah.
So the Buccaneers have the hardest schedule at 22nd. That was with Tom Brady, too. Could you see either the Falcons, Saints, or Panthers passing them and somehow winning this division?
So I was thinking that, like,
one of them's got to.
Carolina, I could low-key see them getting to, like, 8 or 9 wins because I kind of like the weapons that they added. Like, they added Thielen. I love Hayden Hurst. Miles Sanders is a good player. I could see them doing something. I could see them benefiting from an easier schedule. I don't know. I mean, New Orleans, it just seems like they're a little bit more proven and have a little bit more talent. So I think New Orleans probably has the best shot in the NFC South.
I do want to point out that the Falcons have the easiest schedule of the entire league.
Yeah.
And them having the easiest schedule, playing the easiest division, I can see that benefiting them.
I'm intrigued to see Desmond Ridder, too, for sure.
Yeah, and if he doesn't pan out, they have Heineke there, and they could...
Yeah.
Heineke's known as a guy that could go on runs, with not a lot of preparation.
He can keep you above water, you know.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's what
I'm not worried about the Buccaneers, at all. They're not going to take this division this year.
No.
No, I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I'm either going to go Carolina or Atlanta.
I feel like I got to go either Carolina or New Orleans because I think New Orleans just has the best quarterback.
Winston.
I'm trying to remember
Derek Carr.
Yeah. I mean, I don't love Derek Carr, but I don't hate him. And there's no quarterback in that division that I think is that you can place above Carr logically.
Yeah, but the thing is with New Orleans, you don't know what Michael Thomas is going to do.
But at the same time, who else in the NFC South? They don't have anyone anyway.
Panthers. I mean, I would Bryce Young.
We'll see. I mean, he just has to prove it first, and I mean, he's not even going to start the first couple of weeks, so we'll see.
Think so?
No, they said who's their backup? Dalton is going to get the first couple of starts, which is the smart thing to do. I agree with that, but.
Yeah, I do want to point out that the Falcons have a really intriguing offense now because you got Bijan Robinson along with Kyle Pitts, who, Pitts hasn't really shown as much potential as we thought, but he still has the size and athleticism to be that guy when they draft him.
Yeah.
Plus, Drake London as your wide receiver one. They don't really have anyone behind him, although I could see this offense really taking off depending on how Ridder does.
Yeah. No, that actually is true. I actually forgot about London. And another name to mention, too, Pitts. They still have Kyle Pitts.
Yeah.
Who hasn't showed that much, but at the same time, you know the athleticism and the raw talent is there. So I think he just needs a quarterback to bring something out of him, you know?
Yeah.
A lot is going to rest on Ritter's shoulders, but I could see, I think he could do it. I mean, he looked pretty good at Cincinnati. I like his size. His arm was decent. Again, NFL coaching can take you a long way. So, we'll see.
Do you guys have anything else?
I wanted to say one last thing about the schedule rumors. The most interesting one to me, Detroit Lions. Looks like they're going to travel to Kansas City and play the 2023 season opener on Thursday Night Football against Kansas City in Arrowhead. Detroit. Which is they've come a long way. I mean, that game's reserved for some good teams. So I think that says a lot that the NFL is we're going to give the Lions the nod here. I like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think,
it's interesting.
Yeah, they definitely are buying in on the Detroit hype, and I think everyone is.
A lot of people are.
And I like how the NFL actually tries to predict like what's going to be a good matchup. Like we don't see the MLB really doing it or changing the schedule around. Like, for example, when the Cardinals are doing terrible, like they're not going to remove the primetime games that they already gave them, even though they should, and give it to someone else.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we don't really talk about baseball scheduling too much, but I realize that the London series this year is going to have the Cardinals and Cubs. So, yeah, definitely won't be nearly as exciting as when it was the Red Sox and Yankees.
Yeah, that's a shame, because that was really fun.
Speaking of England, the Jags got 2 games in London. Has that ever happened before?
Nah, definitely not. They're looking to move Jacksonville. I think if they want to expand the NFL internationally, the Jaguars might be a team they're looking to move out, because they have struggled really hard to get like a strong fan base there.
I mean, yeah, it's Jacksonville, and Florida's like so overpopulated with teams. Like, and I can't see a team going that far away, like from the general hub. Though, like, I could see like a team like it going to Mexico, but I can't see a team in London. That's way too far across the pond.
The other thing that's interesting too, you mentioned the overpopulation of teams in Florida, that the same owner of the Orlando Magic has proposed trying to get a baseball team in Orlando.
Yeah.
As if the 2 other baseball teams in Florida have done so well with fans. So,
yeah, right.
I mean, look, I understand the whole argument that the Tampa Bay Rays aren't really in Tampa and they're in St. Pete, which makes it hard to get there. The Miami Marlins are right in Miami. And yeah, they've never been great. But this year they're not playing awful either. Like, they're playing 500 baseball, and they still can't get anyone to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I just don't see the want for baseball in Florida. I've never really seen it didn't work out the way that Major League Baseball thought it would when they moved their teams from the East Coast to the West Coast, when there was a want for baseball in California. Mm-hmm. There's not that want in Florida, so I don't think it would make sense to put a 3rd team there, especially when you're seeing a football team where the football revenue is much more different than baseball. It's much more spread out, and Jacksonville's still asking to be moved and trying to move to either London or somewhere else. So I just don't see why Major League Baseball would do that. I think if they did, they would be really foolish. And I think that from the Jaguars trying to move right now when they're just getting good, I don't love that move. But I guess we'll just see what happens.
I think that'll do it for this week. We upload every Saturday at noon, so we'll catch you next Saturday, and look out for the next episode. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at Whistle Throwers so you never miss an episode. All right, peace.